Welcome to this episode of Chattin with Staxx. I'm your host, Bill Staxx, and today we got Randy Couture. But before we get started, I just wanted to come on and give a couple shout outs. Shout out to everyone that's been following me and showing up. Mickey, what's going on? How are you guys tonight? I appreciate everyone that takes the time to watch this show. Got a lot of good guests that are coming on. What's going on with you guys tonight? There's so much going on in the YouTube world. Joey Merlino versus Fran Cheesy. A lot of things have been getting said back and forth, and we're going to go over that tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock. You don't want to miss it. The thumbnail is already made. The show is ready to go. 11 a.m. I will be dropping an exclusive about the whole situation. We're going to break it down and see where you stand in the whole situation. I want to know, whose side are you on? And then you got Crip Mac got busted. Crip Mac is in prison. He's going to the feds for quite a while. A lot of people don't know, but he's going to get a lot of time for possession of a firearm. He got charged 3 different times, so the feds are picking it up, and it's a wrap once they get a hold of your ass. Like, you're guaranteed to do time once the feds pick up the case, because they very rarely lose a case. But I'm not going to bore you with my explaining things. We're going to get right into the interview. So this is part 1 of Randy Couture. I hope you guys enjoy, and hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. I appreciate all of you. Let's get into it.
Make a living any way you cut it, but back then there were only 3 or 4 rules on the books, really. You couldn't groin strike, you couldn't eye gouge, you couldn't strike in the throat, and you couldn't fish hook. And some people don't know what a fish hook is. If somebody has a cut,
Welcome to this episode of Chattin with Staxx. I'm your host, Bill Staxx, and today I got Randy Couture. What's up, Randy?
hey, Bill, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing great. Thank you for taking the time to come on the show. Really appreciate it.
You bet, man. Glad it worked out.
Yeah, me too. So you have an amazing career. You've fought some pretty severe battles in your career. Brock Lesnar, all these incredible athletes. Before we get started, you want to tell the people who you are and where you're from?
Randy Couture grew up in Seattle, Washington, actually about 45 miles north of Seattle, a smaller town called Linwood. I started wrestling at the age of 10 in junior high school up there, junior high and high school. Ended up in the Army at 19 years old. Ended up wrestling for the Army, was an alternate on the 88 Olympic team as a soldier, wrestling for the Army. And actually won my first world championship wrestling for the Army in the Armed Forces Wrestling Championship. It's called SISM, the Military World Championships, in 1988. That summer in Palermo, Sicily. Was a pretty amazing wrestling journey. And that basically was the start of my combative sports training and a life spent on a wrestling mat, basically. Wasn't until 97 when I started fighting and got introduced to the sport of mixed martial arts, or no holds barred, as they called it back then.
Yeah.
Kind of did that on a whim. Was coaching at Oregon State, coaching wrestling, and saw this sport. And back then it was a little different. You filled out an application and sent it in. There was no amateur ranks. There was no proving grounds or place to get your feet wet. You just jumped right in. And my very first fight was UFC 13. I fought twice that night in a heavyweight tournament. The ball was rolling, off and running. So.
And back then there was how many rounds was it?
It wasn't rounds. It was a 21-minute fight. It was 15 minutes And then if nobody won at the end of the 15 minutes, you went 2 3-minute overtimes to hopefully determine a winner. About a year later, we started running towards regulation. They started implementing rounds and coming up with unified rules, and all the things that we see in the sport now are all because of that, running towards regulation, trying to be understood as athletes and as a sport. Because for a long time there, most people thought we were crazy, that we were criminals because of what we do, because we get in the cage and fight. But obviously that's not the case.
It was brutal in the beginning. I remember when it first started. It was brutal.
Yeah, it was tough. It was a tough way to make a living any way you cut it. But back then, there were only 3 or 4 rules on the books, really. You couldn't groin strike, you couldn't eye gouge, you couldn't strike in the throat, and you couldn't fish hook. And some people don't know what a fish hook is. If somebody has a cut or you stick your finger in somebody's mouth, that's considered fish hooking. And that was outlawed back then. But that were really the only four rules on the books at that time.
Wow. Around that time, were there people getting really hurt?
No.
Have you seen people get hurt? I know you've hurt people in the ring.
Really hurt? I mean, maybe you have to define that, but sure, you're going to see people get cut. And I've seen very, very few serious injuries. Occasionally you'll see a joint or a broken limb. It's a contact sport for sure, but most all of those things heal within a matter of weeks. So I've never seen anybody seriously injured in this sport. I competed in it for 14 years and I've been involved in it now since 1997. So 26 years. Yeah, knockouts are a serious thing and something we have to take seriously. And the athletic commissions are there to protect these fighters, sometimes from themselves, because we're a bit crazy. Let's be honest; it's a crazy way to make a living. But I love it. It's a great sport. It's an amazing sport. There's no better character builder on the planet than the individual combative sports, in my opinion.
You're a 6-time UFC champion. You have completed record of 16 title fights. And what was it like to be fighting as a heavyweight?
The bigger guys are just that. They're big, and you have to approach them a little bit differently. You don't try to go nose to nose or toe to toe with guys that size. You have to make them move, make them work. I had to use my agility and my brain. It's a thinking man's game. Kinetic chess, I like to call it. And so you have to make the bigger guys work harder and take them out of their comfort zone. Use the speed, agility, and athleticism that you have against a bigger guy to your advantage as much as possible.
Try to get them winded out, right?
It tends to be harder for big guys to find partners that are going to push them and allow them to get in the kind of shape that smaller guys who have more partners and more training environment are able to do. It's always a challenge. It was a challenge for me to find big heavyweights to come in and train to prepare for a guy like Brock Lesnar or a guy like Tim Sylvia. Those are great big guys. 6'5", 290 pounds. Tim Sylvia, 6'8". Finding guys that are that big to replicate that style of fighting and that size of athlete is what you have to do to prepare to deal with that weight and deal with that size.
Yeah, I mean, so what's it like going into one of them fights with one of these huge guys? Like, do you go in with a strategy? I
was a guy that always tried to have a strategy. To try to figure out where their strengths and weaknesses are, where they seem to like to be and not like to be, where did they win, where did they lose, and then have a team behind you that's going to honestly evaluate your skill set and how that skill set matches up with that opponent. Fighting is problem solving. That guy poses certain problems physically, mentally, technically, tactically, that you have to figure out how to solve. And when you get it right, it's amazing. And when you get it wrong, it's a rough night.
Your record's pretty good, but you've had some losses.
I have a 19-11 fight record. Everybody talks about 6 world championships, so that means I lost it at least 5 times. And the truth is, I lost it all 6. In my mind, winning and championship spirit is not about winning all the time. It's about how you deal with the adversity of losing, picking yourself back up, evaluating where your mistakes were, figuring out how to go back out there and be better, do better, be a better athlete. And at the end of the day, I think a better human.
I think a lot of people, they just focus on the wins. Like you said, you have to overcome that. Like I battle with drug addiction, and my getting through problems in life is probably, it's one of the hardest things to get through problems and not go running to alcohol or drugs. And that's a win for me, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Self-medicating could be a huge issue. Obviously, I work a lot in the veteran community, and those guys are many are struggling with post-traumatic stress, TBIs, as well as some real physical wounds and injuries, and that could be a difficult thing to deal with. Plus, there's an adrenaline-seeking nature, and walking out on a combat zone and being shot at, and having to defend yourself in that way. And so, a lot of these guys are adrenaline-seeking. They self-medicate to kind of numb themselves as they try to transition back to civilian life and be contributing members of our society. And there's a lot of pitfalls involved with that transition. So I know a little bit about what you're talking about. I see it with a lot of our vets on a regular basis.
Yeah. So did they ever call you to go to military service and be deployed or anything like that?
When I was in the Army from 1982 to 1988, there wasn't a whole lot going on back then. Honestly, there was no real military actions going on. I think Grenada happened. There was the Emil DeMarcos debacle down there, and kind of overthrowing that regime. But I never got deployed anywhere. I got out in 88 at the peak of the Cold War. Basically, I was a Cold War veteran.
Yeah.
So I never saw a battlefield, unlike many of these men and women now since 9/11 who have, in the battle on terror in the last 20 years, have had actually go to a battlefield and do the things that I trained to do and never had to do.
But so now after you step away from the fighting, do you help train like law enforcement and things like that with some of the skills that you have?
I've been doing that for a very, very long time. Working with a lot of our special operations soldiers, some of our Secret Service men, the law enforcement officers at FLETC and various combative schools around the U.S. Army and the U.S. Marine Corps. And then, since becoming a public person and a fighter, I've gotten to do way more cool stuff with the military, certainly, than I ever did when I wore the uniform. But it's a way for me to get back, a way for me to use the skills and rub elbows with those guys that I admire, that I appreciate, that took the same oath that I took. I've become a deputy under Sheriff Mike Neal in Monroe County, Arkansas.
I remember that. I remember.
Been doing some speaking with him and some active shooter conferences and things like that, just learning more about that and putting those years of wrestling and fighting skills to use in another capacity, in another forum.
So when you were in the military, were there any crazy incidents happen that you remember?
I mean, most of the crazy stuff that happened to me in the military happened with regard to being on the All Army Wrestling Team, which is a group of crazy guys, trying to carve out their niche on wrestling mats representing the Army. And some of those guys are my best friends to this day. Sweat and bled with those guys, trying to make the Army team, trying to beat the other services, trying to make the national team, make the Olympic team. All those things were the goals that we had set before us and set about, pushing each other, making each other better, and hoping that each and every one of us got an opportunity to achieve those dreams, to achieve those goals.
What's good, everybody? So that's part one of the Randy Couture interview. There's two more parts. It gets pretty interesting. I ask him a lot of questions and we talk about a lot of things. What's good, Mickey? How are you? Catalan, Gianni, how are you? Got Robert. How are you, Robert? Jack Humphrey. This guy's a tough son of a bitch. Really good person. Yeah, he's awesome. I got a huge surprise for you guys tomorrow. So keep watching. Hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. I'm going to keep bringing you guys some really good content. I'm going to give you the best I can with what I got. And you guys will be surprised. I'm surprised that I'm even getting the quality guests I am. So what's going on tonight? Yo, the natural legend. Schmitty, how are you? Good stuff, man. So I'm going to drop the link for tomorrow. You guys are going to like this show tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. It's going to be about the Merlino and Franchisi situation. We're going to really deep dive into it, and I'll make it interesting for you. A lot of things going on out there. So there was big protests in New York City. Someone got stabbed yesterday in Central Park. They got stabbed in the neck and they found their dead body right in Central Park. Crazy. Another guy, while they were protesting, he started like throwing rocks at people or something like that. But there's a lot of craziness going on in the world. I don't know if you guys saw the video of the protest. They were trying to shut roads down and all kinds of things. I want to know what you guys think of the whole situation with Merlino and Michael Franchisi. That's all you can do, Staxx. You guys will like the show tomorrow. So Merlino is upset, or no, Michael Franchisi is upset that Merlino talked about his father. Does he have valid points? Or does he not? Is what Joey Merlino said true? Or is it not? We're going to dig into it tomorrow, and you guys are going to find out. But I'm going to point out some things tomorrow, and it'll clarify the situation for you. Because it's a lot deeper than you guys think it is. And I don't care what Michael Franchisi says, it bothers him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have responded. You know, if things, if people are out there talking shit and it don't mean nothing, you don't respond. I mean, there's no point. For what reason? They don't matter. Mind over matter, right? But obviously, he felt some type of way, so he responded. And it was a pretty long video he made. He took a lot of time and put it into that whole situation. But he said that that Joey Merlino can't shine Sonny's shoes. Well, you can't either. But we're going to get into it tomorrow morning, 11 o'clock. Don't miss it. I heard someone say that Joey's uncle was a snitch. Did Joey still talk to his uncle? I don't think he did. His uncle did cooperate, but I think they cut ties with him after that. Joey's father was a real deal, man. So I find it hard to believe that they would even be in contact. A lot of times when somebody cooperates at that caliber, they don't mess with them anymore. I think it might have been Vodka Man that said it. I can't remember. It was him, Marble Mouse Cali. We're going to talk about him tomorrow too. I know he misses it, right? So we're gonna give him the attention they deserve. So I have a lot of information. I'm gonna be dropping a ton of content. Stay tuned. It's about to get real. And remember, if you don't like this podcast, start your own. I appreciate everyone that watches the show. If you want to help with the toy drive, just donate to Chattin with Staxx at Cash App or Venmo, PayPal, Super Stickers, Super Chats. We're going to help the kids at the shelter this year, like we do every year. This will be the third year we've done it, and it's only going to get better. I have a lot of amazing guests lined up, so hit the like button. And I'll see you guys tomorrow morning. And remember, don't be a bitch.